Durga Mata met Paramahansa Yogananda in 1927 and very soon after came to the headquarters at Mount Washington and joined the monastic order. She was one of the few disciples he actually named as an Indian name. He called her Durga Ma because that was her name in a previous incarnation when she lived in an ashram with him. For many years, she was very closely working with him in a number of chores and tasks, helping build, helping spread the organization. He also had her carefully assigned to assist Rajarsi Janakananda, James Lynn, who after Yogananda's passing became president of Self-Realization Fellowship. She was a simple woman who only went to 6th grade, but I had never met anyone with such insight and wisdom, and I doubt if I ever will. She was very humble. She was short, about 5 feet, a little under 5 feet, and by the time I met her in 1977, she had gray hair. Her eyes were magnetizing. They could see right through us into our soul. And when she spoke, it was with profound wisdom, and at the same time she radiated such love, such joy, that it was heavenly to be in her presence. Those of us who were very close to her, to make Master real in our lives, make him a part of our everyday life, walking with him, talking with him, trusting him. And as I learned to do this, so-called miracles happened. I had a business that I was establishing. I found the right place to live, and my friendships expanded. But more important, she was my spiritual mother, my spiritual mentor, and my role model. And I often would say, I want to be just like you, and she'd smile and say, we all have the privilege to work as she did. And by that she meant meditate, but most of all, control our thoughts. She'd often say, thoughts come like comets. They seemingly come a lot at a time, but in reality they're light, they're consciousness, and they come one at a time. We're not responsible for the first thought, but we are for the second and each thought after that. And instead of letting negative thoughts dominate our minds, we have to use our willpower to change a negative thought to a positive thought. And the more we train ourselves to do that, the more we're going to live in a balanced life and live in tune with God. The other important point she made for me, because there are seemingly complexities in these meditation techniques, and I felt discouraged, she cut through that and made it simple. She would often say, it isn't length of meditation, it's the depth of meditation that counts. It's controlling the mind so that the mind is calm. Then God manifests. And don't look for results in meditation. Quiet the mind, calm the mind, enjoy what comes. That's God. And God is manifest differently for every devotee, for every person, from different day to day. And instead of dissecting or analyzing, what does this light mean? What does this sound mean? Or, I don't see any light, I'm doing something wrong. Make the mind be quiet. Know that God is manifesting. That is what meditation's all about, and enjoy. And she'd say, don't look for the results in meditation. The results actually come after meditation. Sometimes there'd be just a great happiness or a peace or a more balanced way of living. It's a process, and be patient. And then trust in our Guru. He will never bring anything to us that's harmful. He knows what we need. And be in his presence, be in his company. She'd often say, live thought to thought and moment to moment. Then the other very important part of her counseling, she ended every counseling session with this, be happy. God put us on this planet for us to be happy. And when we're happy, then we have that inner attunement with God. And when we're happy all the time, we're with God all the time. I often thought this earth is a difficult place. It's not really our home, as our Guru tells us, but she'd remind us that our consciousness is what we're going to take into the astral. So we must learn to be happy on earth, and then we'll be happy in the astral. We are what we are at the time of death. Our consciousness does not change. We only move out of a body and go into the astral. So we must learn to control our minds and our emotions while we're here in a body. It's very important to have a human body. I wasn't respecting that I have one. One time she had said that millions of souls are trying to get on earth, to get a human body. Only the strong make it. And as we get closer to wanting God, to wanting liberation, God arranges that we can get bodies quicker because God wants us liberated. God wants us back with him. What was it like to be in Durga Ma's presence? She lived in an apartment on the 4th floor of the headquarter building at Mount Washington. which she had built for Rajarsi Yogananda, who only lived there for about a week before his passing. And he had willed it to Durga Ma for her apartment because all her life as a nun, Durga Ma never had a room of her own. She was constantly giving up her room for a guest who might come either to Mount Washington or Encinitas. And Paramahansa Yogananda had said to her one day, "You will have rooms of your own." So this was accomplished after Rajarsi Yogananda passed. So she had that apartment, and we went for counseling sessions. We went up to the 4th floor, and every time I went, I felt I was going up the stairs to heaven. And going in that door, any worries or problems I had vanished, and it was just being in this divine bliss and love and joy that she radiated, which doesn't mean that she didn't give us keen and insightful counseling, and at times even very pointed, and there were times tears would roll down my face. But she always said, it takes a thorn to remove a thorn, and she may take us, do a little spiritual surgery, but she always put us back together again before that session was over. And it was only for our own good. She radiated such wisdom and love. Her counsel was insightful and always deeply intuitive and very, very helpful. It took me a few months after I met her to understand what it was to be counseled. This was new to me. And one day she looked at me very strongly and said, "Why won't you let me help you?" I said, "What do you mean? I thought I was supposed to do this myself. I have the lessons, I'm supposed to meditate." And she explained how, as a counselor, she had a different perspective. She could see personalities and situations from a wider perspective. And also, she said to me, "I don't want to see you suffer." That got through to me. All my life I'd had people around who either wanted to see me suffer or were contributing to my suffering, which is why I was so keenly looking for a spiritual path that would bring me happiness. And here was this wonderful person who didn't want me to suffer. I'd never met anyone like this in my life. And with her help, a lot of these traits I was able to change, and she taught me how to be happy. She also, I want to point out, was very, very humble. She said she was an empty shell for Master. And often she'd talk, and especially when I was first near her, she would shake her finger and say, "Now listen, this is Master talking. You pay attention." And even if a few weeks later I'd ask more about that particular point, she wouldn't remember. It would come into her consciousness, she'd say it, and then it would be gone. But she would say she was an empty shell, and she would encourage us all to be empty shells. Kill the ego. She'd say, "Death to the ego," and then only God and Guru remain. And she'd ask us to be in tune, to be serving rather than working for our own gain, whether it's money, position, career. That wasn't what mattered. What mattered was being in tune and being serviceful. I was trained as a journalist, so I had my notes and I would ask questions, and I'd go up with my list of questions. And sometimes she would answer them, and she would very patiently answer a lot of questions, from very simple, mundane ones to do with diet to the deeper ones about spiritual development. But she didn't always let us direct this. One day I went up with my list of questions, and before I could open my mouth, she gave me the worst scolding I ever had in my life. And she was really, the sword of Durga was flashing. You know, Durga is one of the aspects of Divine Mother. And in Indian culture, one of Durga's arms hold a sword. And that sword was meant to represent slaying delusion. Well, the sword of Durga flashed that day when she scolded me for not trusting God. And it was only about 5 minutes into it, and the tears were pouring down my face. And she said, I said, "Why did this come up? I wasn't even going to ask you this." And she said sternly, "God wanted you to hear this." There were other times I'd go see her and she'd bring something up that I never told anyone, and she couldn't possibly have known unless she was in direct attunement with God.